we talked about earlier. Meanwhile, during all of the misfortunes of the Carter family, things did not go well back in Dudleytown for more of the Carters. In 1774, just 10 years after the Indian Massacre in New York State, a horrible but unidentified epidemic, oh no, here we go again with the epidemics, struck the Dudleytown household of Nathaniel's brother Adoniram. Before medical assistance could be obtained, Adoniram Carter, his wife and only child, were wiped out. It just went to show, they say, that whether people remained in the village for a brief period or a lifetime, there was no escaping the Dudleytown curse. Through the early years of the 19th century, the jinx continued to take its toll. An epidemic in 1813 was far worse than the one that struck down the Carters, with fatalities numbering in the scores, including several of the pioneering Jones family. Later, one of Dudleytown's greatest celebrities, Revolutionary War hero, remember George Washington's friend there, General Herman Swift, became half demented in his old age, especially after one of his several wives was, up here in Dudleytown, struck and killed by lightning. Really? There are also folks willing to blame the curse of their Dudleytown associations for the political misfortunes of Horace Greeley and Samuel Jones Tilden. They will also make a point of noting that Dudleytown native Mary Cheney Greeley died only a week before her husband was disastrously defeated for the presidency by Ulysses S. Grant, and that Greeley himself died shortly after that. By the end of the 19th century, there was very little left of Dudleytown for the malevolent curse to work on. Nevertheless, it had a few gasps left. One of the last people to feel its sting was a solitary farmer, an immigrant from Poland. Oh, this poor soul. We know it's not going to end well, don't we? Who saw in the abandoned farmland and deteriorating homestead of the former Rogers estate an opportunity to make good in his adopted country. He worked hard at pasturing sheep, but within a few years, they say he became discouraged, gave up the farm, and went elsewhere to seek his fortune. His departure left only one family living in Dudleytown. Ooh, maybe our Polish friend escaped there. But now we have Patrick Brophy, an Irish laborer, his wife and two sons. They didn't last long, though. The boys were discovered stealing some sleigh robes down in Cornwall and rapidly left the area, just ahead of the law. Their mother worked too hard, ate too little, and died of tuberculosis soon after the sons' flight. Finally, in 1901, after his house burned to the foundation, Brophy threw in the towel. He left Dudleytown forever, and then there was no one. Almost. Although the last resident of Dudleytown came to the deserted and overgrown village only in the summer, his story is in many ways the most bizarre of all. His name was Dr. William Clark, and he was a prominent physician with a busy practice in New York City and a professorship at City Medical College. One day, while he and his wife were scouting Litchfield County for a piece of property on which to build a country retreat, fate brought them to the old ghost town high above Cornwall Bridge. Dr. Clark bought a great tract of land hard by Dark Entry Road, cleared a pleasant lot on a shady hillside, ooh, that scared me, laid pipe to an icy, ever-flowing spring at the crest of the hill, and built a rustic cabin from the hemlock he had cleared from this land. Although he may have wondered why he was unable to employ any local labor to assist him in constructing his dream hideaway, Dr. Clark enjoyed the hard physical labor and didn't ask questions. Finally, down by the brook at the foot of his hill, he prepared a swimming pool with banks of thick, green moss and crystal water, which he was delighted to share with the gleaming brook trout which swam there. When it was completed and his beautiful wife joined him for a first satisfying splash, the Clarks agreed that this was the closest to heaven either of them was likely to come. Even the owls that were still there then shared in their delight. For many summers, as local residents waited for the old Dudleytown jinx to show itself, the Clarks found nothing but peace, rest, and happiness at their camp in the woods. Then one day, quite expectedly, it happened. Dr. Clark was called back to the city on a medical emergency. They say that as he and his wife waited at the station for the train which would take him away, Mrs. Clark clung to him tightly, begging him to return to her at the earliest possible moment. Witnesses reported that as the train pulled out, the doctor's wife stood for a long time, looking down the track toward the departing train, before slowly moving to her return in the lonely Owlsbury cottage. Dr. Clark completed his business in New York in short order, returning to Cornwall within 36 hours. That's pretty quick, right? 36 hours. But when nobody met him at the station, he hurriedly walked to the opening at Dark Entry Road and plunged into the shadowy woods. Except for the hooting of owls, all was quiet as he entered the clearing where his summer cottage stood. No sign of life greeted him as he ran, terrified, across the lawn to the cabin. But as he pushed open the door, which had been left slightly ajar, he heard a sound that he would never forget. From an upstairs room came the maniacal, uncontrolled laughter of one who had taken leave of her senses. During his absence, his wife had gone mad. Some 70 years have passed since Dr. Clark put a padlock on the last inhabited house in Dudleytown, and this was written in the 70s, so we're looking at about over 100 years. And he returned to the city. No one today remembers the exact location of the old farmhouses or the graves where so many heroes and victims still are buried. And occasionally, curiosity seekers such as us make our way up here and poke in cellar holes with decaying debris and take a few pictures. But it is always dark here. Now, there are additional stories. What fell at my feet were some more stories, including one about a pair of boys that resided with one of the families up here and was trying to sell sheep at market in Cornwall and never returned, and no one ever found them. And more accounts of people going mad or being nonsensical. And some folks tried to say, oh, they were old or they ran away, but a lot of things didn't make sense. And it does seem like history has a lot of eerie connections here in Dudleytown. Now, we will show you a little bit more, and then for those of you that have subscribed for the investigation, we are going to film that in a few moments. But enjoy Dudleytown. Tell us what you see. Send us messages if you see anything quite sinister.